25 Remington electric typewriters were produced powered by Northeast's motors. After some 2,500 electric typewriters had been produced, Northeast asked Remington for a firm contract for the next batch. However, Remington was engaged in merger talks, which would eventually result in the creation of Remington Rand, and no executives were willing to commit to a firm order. Northeast instead decided to enter the typewriter business for itself, and in 1929 produced the first electromatic typewriter. In 1928, Delco, a division of General Motors, purchased Northeast Electric, and the typewriter business was spun off as Electromatic Typewriters, Incorporated. In 1933, Electromatic was acquired by IBM, which then spent $1 million on a redesign of the Electromatic typewriter, launching the IBM Electric Typewriter Model 01. In 1931, an electric typewriter was introduced by Varityper Corporation. It was called the Varityper, because a narrow cylinder-like wheel could be replaced to change the font. In 1941, IBM announced the Electromatic Model 04 electric typewriter, featuring the revolutionary concept of proportional spacing. By assigning varied rather than uniform spacing to different-sized characters, the Type 4 recreated the appearance of a typeset page, an effect that was further enhanced by including the 1937 innovation of carbon film ribbons that produced clearer, sharper words on the page. IBM Selectric, edit. Main article, IBM Selectric. IBM introduced the IBM Selectric typewriter in 1961, which replaced the type bars with a spherical element, or type ball, slightly smaller than a golf ball, with reverse image letters molded into its surface. The Selectric used a system of latches, metal tapes, and pulleys driven by an electric motor to rotate the ball into the correct position and then strike it against the ribbon and platen. The type ball moved laterally in front of the paper, instead of the previous designs using a platen carrying carriage moving the paper across a stationary print position. Due to the physical similarity, the type ball was sometimes referred to as a golf ball. The type ball design had many advantages, especially the elimination of jams, when more than one key was struck at once and the type bars became entangled, and in the ability to change the type ball, allowing multiple fonts to be used in a single document. The IBM Selectric became a commercial success, dominating the office typewriter market for at least 2 decades. IBM also gained an advantage by marketing more heavily to schools than did Remington, with the idea that students who learned to type on a Selectric would later choose IBM typewriters over the competition in the workplace as businesses replaced their old manual models. Later models of IBM executives and Selectrics replaced inked fabric ribbons with carbon film ribbons that had a dry black or colored powder on a clear plastic tape. These could be used only once, but later models used a cartridge that was simple to replace. A side effect of this technology was that the text typed on the machine could be easily read from the used ribbon, raising issues where the machines were used for preparing classified documents. Ribbons had to be accounted for to ensure that typists did not carry them from the facility. A variation known as correcting Selectrics introduced a correction feature, later imitated by competing machines, where a sticky tape in front of the carbon film ribbon could remove the black powdered image of a typed character, eliminating the need for little bottles of white dab-on correction fluid and for hard erasers that could tear the paper. These machines also introduced selectable pitch so that the typewriter could be switched between pica type, 10 characters per inch, and elite type, 12 per inch, even within one document. Even so, all Selectrics were monospaced. Each character and letter space was allotted the same width on the page, from a capital W to a period. IBM did produce a successful type bar-based machine with 5 levels of proportional spacing, called the IBM Executive. The only fully electromechanical selectric typewriter with fully proportional spacing and which used a selectric type element was the expensive selectric composer, which was capable of right margin justification. Typing each line twice was required, once to calculate and again to print, and was considered a typesetting machine rather than a typewriter. Composer type balls physically resembled those of the selectric typewriter but were not interchangeable. In addition to its electronic successors, the magnetic tape selectric composer, mount /SC, the mag card selectric composer, and the electronic selectric composer, IBM also made electronic typewriters with proportional spacing using the selectric element that were considered typewriters or word processors instead of typesetting machines. The first of these was the relatively obscure mag card executive, which used 88 character elements. Later, some of the same type styles used for it were used on the 96 character elements used on the IBM Electronic Typewriter 50 and the later models 65 and 85. By 1970, as offset printing began to replace letterpress printing, the composer would be adapted as the output unit for a phototypesetting system. The system included a computer-driven input station to capture the keystrokes on magnetic tape and insert the operator's format commands, and a composer unit to read the tape and produce the formatted text for photo reproduction. The IBM 2741 terminal was a popular example of a selectric-based computer terminal, and similar mechanisms were employed as the console devices for many IBM System /360 computers. These mechanisms used ruggedized designs compared to those in standard office typewriters. Later electric models, edit. Some of IBM's advances were later adopted in less expensive machines from competitors. For example, Smith Corona electric typewriters introduced in 1973 switched to interchangeable Corona-matic, SCM patented, ribbon cartridges, including fabric, film, erasing, and two-color versions. At about the same time, the advent of photocopying meant that carbon copies, correction fluid and erasers were less and less necessary, only the original need be typed, and photocopies made from it. Electronic typewriters, edit. The final major development of the typewriter was the electronic typewriter. Most of these replaced the type ball with a plastic or metal daisy wheel mechanism, a disc with the letters molded on the outside edge of the petals. The daisy wheel concept first emerged in printers developed by Diablo Systems in the 1970s. The first electronic daisy wheel typewriter marketed in the world, in 1976, is the Olivetti TES 501, and subsequently in 1978, the Olivetti ET101, with function display, and Olivetti TES 401, with text display and floppy disk for memory storage. This has allowed Olivetti to maintain the world record in the design of electronic typewriters, proposing increasingly advanced and performing models in the following years. Unlike the Selectrics and earlier models, these really were electronic and relied on integrated circuits and electromechanical components. These typewriters were sometimes called display typewriters, dedicated word processors or word processing typewriters, though the latter term was also frequently applied to less sophisticated machines that featured only a tiny, sometimes just single-row display. Sophisticated models were also called word processors, though today that term almost always denotes a type of software program. Manufacturers of such machines included Olivetti, TES 501, first totally electronic Olivetti word processor with daisy wheel and floppy disk in 1976, TS621 in 1979, etc. Brother WP1 and WP500, etc., where WP stood for Word Processor, Canon CAT, Smith Corona, PWP, i.e. Personal Word Processor Line, and Philips / Magnavox, Video Writer. 1. Electronic typewriter, the final stage in typewriter development. A 1989 Canon Typester 110. 2. The Brother WP1, an electronic typewriter complete with a small screen and a floppy disk reader. Decline, edit. The pace of change was so rapid that it was common for clerical staff to have to learn several new systems, one after the other, in just a few years. While such rapid change is commonplace today, and is taken for granted, this was not always so. In fact, typewriting technology changed very little in its first 80 or 90 years. Due to falling sales, IBM sold its typewriter division in 1991 to the newly formed Lexmark, completely exiting from a market it once dominated. The increasing dominance of personal computers, desktop publishing, the introduction of low-cost, truly high-quality laser and inkjet printer technologies, and the pervasive use of web publishing, email, text messaging, and other electronic communication techniques have largely replaced typewriters in the United States. Still, as of 2009, typewriters continue to be used by a number of government agencies and other institutions in the U.S., where they are primarily used to fill pre-printed forms. According to a Boston typewriter repairman quoted by the Boston Globe, every maternity ward has a typewriter, as well as funeral homes. A rather specialized market for typewriters exists due to the regulations of many correctional systems in the U.S., where prisoners are prohibited from having computers or telecommunication equipment, but are allowed to own typewriters. The Swintig Corporation, headquartered in Moonachie, New Jersey, which, as of 2011, still produced typewriters at its overseas factories, in Japan, Indonesia, and / or Malaysia, manufactures a variety of typewriters for use in prisons, made of clear plastic, to make it harder for prisoners to hide prohibited items inside it. As of 2011, the company had contracts with prisons in 43 U.S. states. In April 2011, Godrej & Boyce, a Mumbai-based manufacturer of mechanical typewriters, closed its doors, leading to a flurry of news reports that the world's last typewriter factory had shut down. The reports were quickly contested, with opinions settling to agree that it was indeed the world's last producer of manual typewriters. In November 2012, Brothers UK factory manufactured what it claimed to be the last typewriter ever made in the UK. The typewriter was donated to the London Science Museum. Russian typewriters use Cyrillic, which has made the ongoing Azerbaijani reconversion from Cyrillic to Latin alphabet more difficult. In 1997, the government of Turkey offered to donate Western typewriters to the Republic of Azerbaijan in exchange for more zealous and exclusive promotion of the Latin alphabet for the Azerbaijani language. This offer, however, was declined. In Latin America and Africa, mechanical typewriters are still common because they can be used without electrical power. In Latin America, the typewriters used are most often Brazilian models. Brazil continues to produce mechanical, facet, and electronic, Olivetti, typewriters to the present day. The early 21st century saw revival of interest in typewriters among certain subcultures, including makers, steampunks, hipsters, and street poets. Correction technologies, edit. According to the standards taught in secretarial schools in the mid-20th century, a business letter was supposed to have no mistakes and no visible corrections. Typewriter erasers, edit. The traditional erasing method involved the use of a special typewriter eraser made of hard rubber that contained an abrasive material. Some were thin, flat discs, pink or gray, approximately 2 inches, 51 millimeters, in diameter by 1/8 inch, 3.2 millimeters, thick, with a brush attached from the center, while others looked like pink pencils, with a sharpenable eraser at the lead end and a stiff nylon brush at the other end. Either way, these tools made possible erasure of individual typed letters. Business letters were typed on heavyweight, high-rad content bond paper, not merely to provide a luxurious appearance, but also to stand up to erasure. Typewriter eraser brushes were necessary for clearing eraser crumbs and paper dust, and using the brush properly was an important element of typewriting skill. If erasure detritus fell into the typewriter, a small build-up could cause the type bars to jam in their narrow supporting grooves. Erasing shield, edit. Erasing a set of carbon copies was particularly difficult, and called for the use of a device called an erasing shield or eraser shield, a thin stainless steel rectangle about 2 by 3 inches, 51 by 76 millimeters, with several tiny holes in it, to prevent the pressure of erasing on the upper copies from producing carbon smudges on the lower copies. To correct copies, typists had to go from one carbon copy layer to the next carbon copy layer, trying not to get their fingers dirty as they leafed through the carbon papers, and moving and repositioning the eraser shield and eraser for each copy. Erasable bond, edit. Paper companies produced a special form of typewriter paper called erasable bond, for example, Eaton's corrosible bond. This incorporated a thin layer of material that prevented ink from penetrating and was relatively soft and easy to remove from the page. An ordinary soft pencil eraser could quickly produce perfect erasures on this kind of paper. However, the same characteristics that made the paper erasable made the characters subject to smudging due to ordinary friction and deliberate alteration after the fact, making it unacceptable for business correspondence, contracts, or any archival use. Correction fluid, edit. Main article, correction fluid. In the 1950s and 1960s, correction fluid made its appearance, under brand names such as liquid paper, whiteout and T-X. It was invented by Bette Nesmith Graham. Correction fluid was a kind of opaque, white, fast-drying paint that produced a fresh white surface onto which, when dry, a correction could be retyped. However, when held to the light, the covered-up characters were visible, as was the patch of dry correction fluid, which was never perfectly flat, and frequently not a perfect match for the color, texture, and luster of the surrounding paper. The standard trick for solving this problem was photocopying the corrected page, but this was possible only with high-quality photocopiers. A different fluid was available for correcting stencils. It sealed up the stencil ready for retyping but did not attempt to color match. Legacy, edit. Keyboard layouts, edit. QWERTY, edit. Main article, QWERTY. The 1874 Scholz and Glidden typewriters established the QWERTY layout for the letter keys. During the period in which Scholz and his colleagues were experimenting with this invention, other keyboard arrangements were apparently tried, but these are poorly documented. The QWERTY layout of keys has become the de facto standard for English language typewriter and computer keyboards. Other languages written in the Latin alphabet sometimes use variants of the QWERTY layouts, such as the French AZERTY, the Italian QWERTY and the German QWERTZ layouts. The QWERTY layout is not the most efficient layout possible for the English language. Touch typists are required to move their fingers between rows to type the most common letters. Although the QWERTY keyboard was the most commonly used layout in typewriters, a better, less strenuous keyboard was being searched for throughout the late 1900s. One popular but incorrect explanation for the QWERTY arrangement is that it was designed to reduce the likelihood of internal clashing of type bars by placing commonly used combinations of letters farther from each other inside the machine. Other layouts for English, edit. A number of radically different layouts such as Dvorak have been proposed to reduce the perceived inefficiencies of QWERTY, but none have been able to displace the QWERTY layout. Their proponents claim considerable advantages, but so far none has been widely used. The Blickitstafer typewriter with its DA tensor layout may have possibly been the first attempt at optimizing the keyboard layout for efficiency advantages. On modern keyboards, the exclamation point is the shifted character on the one key, because these were the last characters to become standard on keyboards. Holding the spacebar down usually suspended the carriage advance mechanism, a so-called dead key feature, allowing one to superimpose multiple key strikes on a single location. The cent symbol, meaning cents, was located above the number 6 on American electric typewriters, whereas ANSI standard computer keyboards have caret instead. Keyboards for other languages, edit. The keyboards for other Latin languages are broadly similar to QWERTY but are optimized for the relevant orthography. In addition to some changes in the order of letters, perhaps the most obvious is the presence of precomposed characters and diacritics. Many non-Latin alphabets have keyboard layouts that have nothing to do with QWERTY. The Russian layout, for instance, puts the common trigrams and on adjacent keys so that they can be typed by rolling the fingers. Typewriters were also made for East Asian languages with thousands of characters, such as Chinese or Japanese. They were not easy to operate, but professional typists used them for a long time until the development of electronic word processors and laser printers in the 1980s. Typewriter conventions, edit. A number of typographical conventions stem from the typewriter's characteristics and limitations. For example, the QWERTY keyboard typewriter did not include keys for the EN- and the M-. To overcome this limitation, users typically typed more than one adjacent hyphen to approximate these symbols. This typewriter convention is still sometimes used today, even though modern computer word processing applications can input the correct EN and M dashes for each font type. Other examples of typewriter practices that are sometimes still used in desktop publishing systems include inserting a double space between sentences, and the use of the typewriter apostrophe, and straight quotes, as quotation marks and prime marks. The practice of underlining text in place of italics and the use of all capitals to provide emphasis are additional examples of typographical conventions that derived from the limitations of the typewriter keyboard that still carry on today. Many older typewriters did not include a separate key for the numeral 1 or the exclamation point, and some even older ones also lacked the numeral 0, 0. Typists who trained on these machines learned the habit of using the lowercase letter L, for the digit 1, and the uppercase O, for the 0. A cent symbol, cent was created by combining, overstriking, a lowercase c with a slash character, typing C, then backspace, then forward slash. Similarly, the exclamation point was created by combining an apostrophe and a period, plus. Almost equal to. Terminology repurposed for the computer age, edit. Some terminology from the typewriter age has survived into the computer era. 1 backspace, BS, a keystroke that moved the cursor backwards one position. On a typewriter, this moved the physical platen backwards. to enable a character to be overtipped. Originally this was used to combine characters, for example, the sequence, backspace, to make. Subsequently it facilitated erase and retype corrections, using correction tape or fluid. Only the latter concept has survived into the computer age. Two-carriage return, CR, return to the first column of text. Most typewriters switched automatically to the next line. In computer systems, line feed, see below, is a function that is controlled independently. Three cursor a marker used to indicate where the next character will be printed. The cursor was originally a term to describe the clear slider on a slide rule. On typewriters, it was the paper that moved and the insertion point was fixed. For cut and paste, taking text, a numerical table, or an image and pasting it into a document. The term originated when such compound documents were created using manual paste-up techniques for typographic page layout. Actual brushes and paste were later replaced by hot wax machines equipped with cylinders that applied melted adhesive wax to developed prints of typeset copy. This copy was then cut out with knives and rulers, and slid into position on layout sheets on slanting layout tables. After the copy had been correctly positioned and squared up using a T-square and set square, it was pressed down with a brayer, or roller. The whole point of the exercise was to create so-called camera-ready copy which existed only to be photographed and then printed, usually by offset lithography. 5 dead key, a key that, when typed, does not advance the typing position, thus allowing another character to be overstruck on top of the original character. This was typically used to combine diacritical marks with letters they modified. For example, E can be generated by first pressing and then E. In Europe, where most languages have diacritics, a typical mechanical arrangement meant that hitting the accent key typed the symbol but did not advance the carriage. Consequently, the next character to be typed landed on the same position. It was this method that carried across to the computer age, whereas an alternative method, press the space bar simultaneously, did not. 6-line feed, LF, also called new line, whereas most typewriters rolled the paper forward automatically on a carriage return. This is an explicit control character on computer systems that moves the cursor to the next on-screen line of text. But not to the beginning of that line. A CR is also needed if that effect is desired. 7. Shift, a modifier key used to type capital letters and other alternate uppercase characters, when pressed and held down, with Shift, a typewriter's mechanism to allow a different type bar impression, such as D instead of D, to press into the ribbon and print on a page. The concept of a shift key or modifier key was later extended to Control, Alt, Alt-GR and Super, Windows or Apple, keys on modern computer keyboards. The generalized concept of a shift key reached its apex in the MIT Space Cadet keyboard. 8. Tab, height, shortened from horizontal tab or tabulator stop, caused the print position to advance horizontally to the next preset tab stop. This was used for typing lists and tables with vertical columns of numbers or words. 1. The vertical tab, VT, control character, named by analogy with height, was designed for use with early computer line printers, and would cause the fanfold paper to be fed until the next line's position. 9. TTY, short for teletypewriter, used in Unix-like operating systems to designate a given terminal. Social effects, edit. Humorous get out. Can't you see I'm busy postcard, 1900s. When Remington started marketing typewriters, the company assumed the machine would not be used for composing but for transcribing dictation, and that the person typing would be a woman. The 1800s Scholz and Glidden typewriter had floral ornamentation on the case. During World Wars I and II, increasing numbers of women were entering the workforce. In the United States, women often started in the professional workplace as copy typists. Being a typist was considered the right choice for a good girl, meaning women who present themselves as being chaste and having good conduct. According to the 1900 census, 94.9% of stenographers and typists were unmarried women. This also led to an increase in schools and classes for typing in order to prepare for a future job. Moreover, the word typewriter also became associated with the women who typed during the time period. Questions about morals made a salacious businessman making sexual advances to a female typist into a cliché of office life.